All right, good morning, everyone. So it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today. His name is Greg Shu. He's very familiar with our church as he grew up in this church too. But in case you do not know him, Greg, he is a staff at InterVarsity for MIT. He is married to his wife, Lily, and they serve at the High Rock Church in Cambridge. They have two sons, Manny and James. So let's welcome Greg as he comes up and he shares from God's Word with us.
All right, can you hear me? Thanks, Ivan. Thanks, everyone. Hi, folks. It's a pleasure to be here with you. For those who know me, you know me since I was small, and for those who don't, I probably knew you when you were small. But I'm Greg Shu. I'm a campus minister with InterVarsity, and I grew up going to CGCM and consider it my home church still. So it's always a pleasure to be back to preach, to connect, to serve when possible. Today I have the privilege of preaching on continuing the series in Matthew. And we're now in the text of Matthew 5. So we're going to read the first portion of this chapter today, Matthew 5, 1 through 12. It's a pretty famous section. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of God, heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. From the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." The word of the Lord. I want to ask you a question. If you could have anything you wanted, anything, what would it be? What do you stay awake at night, dreaming about, pining for, longing to have? What goals are you working towards? What things are you giving it your all to acquire or accomplish? What hopes or desires come to mind for you? Maybe it's a thing. Maybe it's something you want to have. Maybe it's a Lexus in the driveway, or a Tesla these days probably. Or maybe more exotic, a Porsche or a Ferrari. Or maybe it's having a house of a certain size in a certain zip code. Or maybe it's owning a house at all, which is hard in this environment. Maybe it's getting to travel, to have a certain kind of luxury in your life, a certain wardrobe, a certain lifestyle or income level. Because if you had that thing or those things, it would mean you've made it somehow. You are where you want to be. You're who you want to be. You're financially secure and stable. You're established. Maybe it's something you want. Or maybe it's something you would want to do, right? There's things you can have, but there's things you can also do. Is it a certain role? Do you want to be prom king or queen? Do they even do that anymore? Do you want to make varsity, or the state orchestra, or team captain, or class president, or valedictorian? Maybe you want to get into a certain college, or a certain grad school, or there's a job you want at a company you want to be at. Maybe you want to make manager, or director, or VP, or CEO, or CFO, or senator, or president. Maybe it's senior scientist, professor, provost. Because if you had that, if the title around your name, the letters before and after, the descriptors beneath, if you had that, if you did that, maybe you'd be where you want to be. You'd have what you want to have. You'd be capable, powerful. Or maybe the thing you dream about, maybe the thing you want, it's maybe more about how others think of you. Maybe some of you really want to be famous. You wish you were an influencer. Maybe it's longing for a romantic partner. And that could be like a specific person that you know, or like a celebrity you have a crush on, or like a kind of person that checks all the boxes. Maybe that's something you really want. Or maybe it's just to not be single at all. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe it's to be seen of a certain way, approved of, respected, to have fans or followers or family. Because if you had that, if you had those things, if people saw you that way, then maybe you'd know that you are important to somebody, to anybody, to everybody. What is it that you want? Because I think that when we answer this question, when we think about this question, it shows us what we believe the blessed life looks like. What does the blessed life look like for you? Now, the definition of the blessed life can change, and it does change to suit the season that you're in, the conditions that you're in, and I've seen that in my own life. So, in my childhood and adolescence, the blessed life was to get into a very good private school for high school, which I did. I went to Phillips Academy in Andover. And then it was to make varsity for the track team, which I did end of my freshman year. And then it was to become captain of the track team, which I did my senior year. And then it was to get into a good college, which I did. I went to Duke University. We were ranked number 12 by the time I entered and 8 by the time I left. So did pretty well. But when I got to college, my priorities shifted. And I think for the better, honestly. I was very involved in my Christian fellowship, and I really wanted to be a leader that people sought after, to be respected. And then, I became a professional Christian minister and a missionary of the campus. And this was a costly choice, right? Like, I think probably when, speaking to youth, when your parents look at me, they say, wow, that's really admirable. I hope my kid never does that. But even in this kind of downwardly mobile trajectory, even in this spiritual profession, there was this shape of a blessed life that sounded good, certainly. I wanted my fellowship to grow to a certain size. I wanted to preach at certain events or conferences. I wanted to have leadership roles, to supervise ministry, right? And then, of course, at that point in my personal life, I wanted to get married, and I wanted to have kids. And I'm fortunate now that I am married, and we do have kids. It's great. And now it's sort of to buy a house, which in Cambridge is like just shy of a miracle, so we'll see if that happens. See, there are many ways that the blessed life can look. It can look different at different times. And I'm not here right now to tell you that your idea of the blessed life is necessarily bad or wrong. I mean, much of what I pursued, certainly in my adulthood, certainly something that I pursued were really pretty good. They were good things I was good at, things that were good for other people. Growing and increasing in ministry gave me chances to do, I think, really good work and raise up staff who do really good work. See people come to faith and people say yes to Jesus in all kinds of ways. There's a lot of good. But, for all of that blessedness that I have and have had, I also have to be honest that I've experienced lots of unblessed feelings. Though I was living the dream in high school, I was often depressed, constantly stressed out, worried about how popular I was. I can look back now and say, oh, this season I had a hard time getting out of bed. This season that I had what I would now call panic attacks when things were going poorly, right? Like, for all that was going well, I did not feel well. In college, in my first years of ministry, my happiness was very tied to how well things were going, to how many people were coming, to how good that sermon sounded. In my kind of hope to not be single, I was pursuing relationships I really shouldn't have. That cost me a lot. And I was also just blind to the ways that my goals, even my good-sounding goals, really concealed or excused unhealthy ways of thinking or acting, the ways that I would make things about me and not about God. But no matter your experience of the blessed life, this text today, I think, is interesting because it shows us what God's idea of the blessed life actually is. This section is often called the Beatitudes, named after which is like the blessed statements or the blessed are statements. And it's God's picture of the blessed life that we can experience through Jesus in the kingdom. And my first thought is God's idea of the blessed life is pretty different than my own, or at least the world's. You can look at it a bunch of different ways, but when I was sitting with the passage, what rose up for me was that there were sort of two categories of people or kinds of things, people getting blessed. And the first are those who are hurting, the blessed hurting. These are the poor in spirit, those who mourn, those who are weak, those who are persecuted because of righteousness, those who are insulted, right? Who are slandered, right? If you look at that life, if you're mourning, if you're being insulted, if you're being talked about behind your back, if you're being persecuted, I would say, that doesn't look very blessed to me. If anything, that looks cursed. It's not a blessed life, that's a cursed life. And these people who are hurting, they are poor in material terms, but also spiritual terms. They're crying out, they're longing for more. They want more out of life and out of themselves. Those who are mourning or grieving a loss or a lost loved one, right? They are longing for grief to be made right for them. Those who are persecuted, kind of goes without saying, I don't want any of that. I don't want someone to come after me. I don't want to be harassed or bothered or bullied. I don't want any of those things. Who wants to be like any of these people? I sure don't. I don't wake up in the morning and say, you know what? I really want to be insulted today. That would be just so great. Or, man, I would love to be in a state of grief and mourning. Nobody wants these things. See, this section, the blessed hurting, I think it offends and it confuses our sensibilities because in our world, blessedness is a state that we chase or we pursue or we earn. But here, for the people who are in great pain, here, blessedness is not a thing that you earn. It's a thing that you are granted. It's a thing you are given. It's a thing that is bestowed onto you. Here, blessedness is given to these people in spite of their misery. You might also say, blessedness is given to them because of their misery. God blesses the hurting because they are hurting. We, I think, gravitate to people who are winning in life. That's what we do. It's what we want to do. Who we model our careers after, which YouTube accounts or Instagram accounts we kind of follow and aspire to. Like we like to be around people who are winning and going where we want to go. And so we gravitate to those sorts of people, those who are successful in life, and we tend to ignore or at least forget, but we often also take pity on or disdain those people who are not succeeding, not winning, not doing well. We don't want to be like them. They don't offer us anything. I think we're sometimes afraid that their kind of misery will rub off on us if we spend too much time with them. But Jesus doesn't discard the people who are hurting. In fact, he draws closer. He bestows blessing on them in the midst of their hurt and misery. So blessedness, it's not a state of mind or quality of life that we achieve and work toward. It is a state of the soul where we experience God in the midst of, in spite of, because of what is hard. Blessedness in the kingdom includes people who we would never describe as blessed in the world. Now, when I think about how hard it is, Jesus gives these promises to these people. For those who are poor in spirit and persecuted, theirs is the kingdom, it says. They are rightful owners, citizens of the kingdom, right? So instead of feeling empty or dispossessed like they do in the world, they are told and assured that they will not be alone. They will find a home in Jesus. They will be full citizens in the kingdom. And for those who are mourning, it says they will be comforted. Now, I don't know if that's now or later, probably both. But, I think that the promise of comfort is important because, I don't think our American culture offers much comfort to those who mourn. We are not interested in being sad as a culture, right? Bereavement leave is pretty much non-existent. You lose a loved one and you're expected to be back to work 2 weeks later. And you might not even get paid time off if you do that. It depends on your company, I guess. But God promises comfort to those who mourn. These are interesting promises for people who we would not consider blessed. Now, then there's a group of blessings that are reserved for those who are, they're not hurting, I would say, but they are holy, right? There's the blessing for the holy. These are the people who are, they hunger and thirst for righteousness. They are merciful. They show mercy to others. They're pure in heart. They're meek. Instead of exercising power forcefully, they restrain themselves. And then those who are peacemakers, right? So these folks are doing good things. And choosing the high road, being good and godly towards others, even when you've been wronged, that is a hard way to live consistently. If you're being spoken poorly about, if you're being passed over for promotion, if you're being discriminated against, whether it's microaggressive or something much more obvious, right? To choose a holy response regularly is very hard. You know, the peacemakers, well, you're only called a peacemaker if you're around war and conflict all the time. You show mercy only if you're faced with wrongdoing and you have to kind of figure out a way to respond at all. And to be pure in heart, I think, is just very difficult in general, especially in our world that's surrounded by kind of material and sexual imagery that I think is meant to kind of entice us, right? It's difficult to have a pure heart. You know, so even though these folks are doing holy things, they're trying to be holy, and Jesus calls them blessed, I would honestly say, I mean, their life actually sounds also kind of cursed. It's very hard to live this way. I don't like living that way. It's hard. But Jesus says it is blessed. They will also be blessed. What does God give them, though? Well, for those who are meek, for those who do not flex their power or abuse their authority, well, they are called blessed and they will inherit the earth. Inherit the earth. Which is interesting because, you know, they may not have it all now. They may be choosing to be godly and therefore foregoing opportunities or, you know, if you want to turn the gossip mill a certain way, you can. If you want to make the office work a certain way, you can. If you want to talk about people behind their back, you can. But meekness chooses not to do that, right? And so because of that, you may be passed over for stuff. You may get the short end of the stick. But it says that they will inherit the earth because, you know, they may not have it all now, those who are meek, but in the coming age, they will be recipients of this lavish inheritance. The kingdom will belong to them. The whole earth will belong to them, which I think is a huge comfort. It says for those who are insulted by harmful lies, actually they'll have a reward like the prophets because they're like the prophets. That's a pretty great consolation for those who are insulted, that you will actually be seen in high regard in the kingdom. You know, for those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, they'll be filled, fulfilled, complete, satisfied. And that is a pretty big deal because I think in our world, we are rarely ever satisfied. And it's not just some kind of generic satisfaction. I think God will come and he will quench their thirst with living water. They will taste and see that the Lord is good. The pure in heart, it says that they will see God. And I think that this is interesting because many of us probably in our regular life, our regular spiritual life, it's not always easy to see where God is or what he's doing. You can look at your weekly schedule, the people that you're investing in, if you're parents, you can look at all the work you've done and you say, I wonder, like, what is God doing? Is God doing anything? Am I doing anything? Where are we? You don't always know where God is. As you kind of wait for things that you're working towards, you don't always know where God is. But it says that the pure in heart will see God. And my best understanding of that is that, you know, sometimes we're busy and we're tempted or distracted, we're addicted, and so therefore we don't have a lot of room to see God. But if we pursue purity of heart, then actually it is quiet, there's space, less noise, less distraction, more clarity. Then you can see where God is moving or working. Maybe not right in the moment, but much more quickly. It says that those who show mercy, they'll also be given mercy from God. And I think that also mercy is rare in our world. You know, 3 strikes and you're out, or for a while in the state of California, 3 strikes and you're in prison for life. The peacemakers will be called children of God. Why? Because, well, peacemakers, they look like God. They resemble him. They have his traits, his characteristics. They make peace in a fearful, broken world by walking the way of Jesus, by bringing people together through grace and truth. So there's blessing for the hurting, and there's blessing for the holy. I personally don't like either of the states that they're in. the life that they have. That sounds unpleasant to me, but there's blessing for both of them. And I sort of wonder, well, why? What's the point of talking about this sort of blessing? Well, I think it's because Jesus draws near to people in a way that the world does not. And he offers a logic, an economy, a commitment to us all that the world will never give you. The world will say, hey, if you're down, tough luck for you. You should have tried harder. You should have been this. You should have been that. You should look this way instead. There's all kinds of harsh realities in the world, but that's not how Jesus works. In the kingdom, that is not how the world works. And Jesus gives these mercies to us, whether you're hurting or holy, as a gift to direct us beyond the circumstance, to point us beyond the current pain or the cost of living righteously. First, I think it points us to the final day when everything will be made right, when all that is wrong will be dealt with, forgiven or punished in the right kind of way. So we can look forward to our eternal hope in heaven. I think that's actually a really big deal. But I also think that God gives us these gifts now to help us experience him in the present. That the eternal life is not just sort of some far-off place in an infinite calendar date or at an infinite distance, but it's actually a reality where our world will be made new. When we say heaven, we usually mean we're going to float up into the sky and sit on clouds and play harps and eat grapes or whatever, right? Actually, heaven comes down to earth and remakes everything. And so I think it's not too far to say that you will walk on similar, if you live in a certain town, you see a certain hill, you'll see it in heaven. It will probably look different, probably better, right? But it'll be in heaven because God remakes. He doesn't just hit reset. And so in the moment, in our current reality, as hard as it may be, we get to experience glimpses of that eternal redemptive future breaking into the present. It spills into our present. And maybe you've already felt this to some degree at some point. Maybe, have you ever experienced a sense of peace that kind of transcends understanding, that just completely surpasses the environment? You sit there, you say, I should be freaking out right now, but I think I'm not. That is interesting. Have you ever had a sense of security that was very immovable no matter how chaotic it was around you? You just said, I'm strangely unafraid of what's happening right now. Maybe you felt an overwhelming feeling of love, God's delight in you. I remember going to whether it was winter teen conference or our own kind of summer conferences, like during worship sometimes, it would just be this overwhelming kind of an emotional moment. You just are brought to tears by something in the words, in the music, or when you're reading scripture. You just feel overcome by something. Tears fill your eyes, right? I think these are all slivers. These are all hints of the final ultimate blessed state in heaven. We get to experience these as a foretaste of the eventual meal. And that foretaste, though, I think it's also meant to fuel us, to help us persevere, right? See, I don't think God gives us these kind of slivers, these kind of transcendent moments, as if it is presently the norm. It's not meant to become a succulent kind of diet for the sedentary lifestyle, right? And I know this because when the three of the disciples went up to the mountain with Jesus and he was transfigured before them, they had this state of spiritual bliss and ecstasy. They were overcome. They were, just overcome by God's love. They said, I want to stay here forever, they said. Let's build houses and stay on this mountaintop with God's Spirit forever. This is where I want to be. And then Jesus, the kind of flashing lights, transfiguration, and then it's like they're gone. Like, hey, where'd the strobes go? And he said, well, let's go back down. They're like, no, we want to build a house here. Like, let's stay here with you. He's like, no, well, I'm Jesus. I'm going back down. So you can do what you want with that, right? And from that, we can see that we're not meant to simply just live in or escape to this sort of like blessed state, this kind of like holy high, even if it is given by God. We're not meant to kind of live there in a way that kind of forgets the rest of the world. We actually taste that on our inspired, we're fueled, we're healed, we're transformed by it, so that when we go back into our real lives, we have energy and focus and power and faith to do what's necessary. To forgive others, to forgo reprisal against others, to be generous, sacrificially generous, to actually seek our own healing too. Inner work in your life is very hard to do. It's very hard. I've seen a counselor or therapist for, gosh, I don't know how many years now, 11 years on and off. And I don't like a lot of those conversations. I don't want to talk about where my anger comes from or why I'm an impatient person. I would just rather say, oh, I guess I'm just born that way. I'll just go back to my normal life. No, like the hard work of kind of being healed and holy is not necessarily pleasant. But when we see God at work in these glimpses, we might say, okay, maybe it might be hard work, but it might be worth it. Both for now and for the final day. God fuels us with these kind of things to give us energy for the life that we actually need to live, to love the way we need to live, to love the way we need to love, and do good in the world and around us. Again, what does the blessed life look like to you? Is it about something stuff you have? Things you get to do? How people think about you? Or is it more like this? And again, don't hear me incorrectly. I think this is a very hard way to live. It's a very strange way to live, but this is the blessed life that Jesus is offering us. I think that when we actually start to live in this way, it can be costly because you have to give up other ways of living. You have to choose not to operate the way that the world does. You have to choose to trust that God actually will come through on his promise, both now and eternally. That's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but God offers that. He promises that. And what I think can happen is when we do that, we get to experience fruitfulness, and maybe some of the thorns that plague us in life, they shrink or get smaller, or we have a better way to bounce back. We learn to become free from pressure or materialism, or the kind of angst to get into a good school, or the angst to make sure your kids get into a good school, whatever any of that stuff is, right? You can do what is good without any of the fear. You learn to see and experience goodness and love as what really makes life blessed. Instead of all this other stuff, as important as it is, and as good as it can be, the most important thing being love and God's love and love for others, that you learn to be able to live in that reality, no matter what else happens. And I've had a lot of chance to think about this lately. I've been to 2 funerals in 2 weeks, and both of them are people who are close to my age. One of them obviously was here at CGCM to mourn and celebrate the life of Paul Ying, who was a member of this very congregation, this specific ministry in the church. The other one I went to Duke, right? So the other one was at Duke in North Carolina. I flew back last night, got in at 1 a.m. in the morning, and it was a college friend who was in my fellowship. I served alongside her. Her husband was also a member of the fellowship, right? And I look at their lives and the tragedy of their deaths, and my first thought is that this is just completely unfair and wrong. It makes no sense. They're 30-something. How can this be? Why should a man just 2 years older than me and a woman 2 years younger than me be killed by cancer when they have plenty of years left ahead? They should have had plenty of years left ahead. And also, this college friend of mine, she leaves behind a husband and 2 young kids who are the same age as Lily and our kids, 4 and 2. When I look at them, when I look at that, I feel great sorrow. And my first feeling is like, I'm sad, and they seem cursed, wretchedly unlucky, cursed with uncooperative DNA and untrustworthy genes. Or at the very least, I'm mad at the general curse of sin and how it overtook part of their lives. What I will say, though, is having been to both funerals, I was moved and challenged and convicted in ways I didn't want to be. Because I think that both of those people, the witness of their lives, the testimony at the end from their own lips and what people said about them, was that they experienced some sort of blessing. If any of you were at Paul Ying's funeral, I was just moved by how so many people from so many parts of his life, with so many levels of achievement or lack thereof in a secular sense, some who had learning disabilities like him, they just expressed the same thing over and over again. Paul listened to you, he cared about you, he asked about you. He loved others sometimes more than himself. That's very Jesus-like. That's a very holy way to live. I'm not good at that way of living, but Paul seemed to find a way to do that, and because of that, there was a lot of fruitfulness. We shed a lot of tears because there was so much good that we had tasted. He paid attention to people. He treated others with sort of an indiscriminate, unstingy dignity. He dignified everybody that he met. And in a way, I think his life was ultimately shaped by lots of love. Love that he received and love that he gave. And, I think Eric actually said it when he was giving the homily, but in some of Paul's last days, though there was a lot of darkness and grief in that, in Paul's own heart, he also spent a lot of time listening to the song Waymaker over and over and over again. Because his mom wasn't listening to the lyrics, she was like, why are you listening to the same song? Like, can we listen to something else, right? And Paul's like, no, I want to listen to this one song. Even when it was hard for him to speak, he just wanted to listen to this one song over and over again. In the darkest hours, he experienced the blessedness of God's presence and light. My friend in college, Hedgen, was kind of the same. In her final weeks, when she was in the ICU or when things were getting pretty bad, she told her husband, I feel God. When it was really, really drastic at the end, she couldn't even speak anymore. She was kind of writing to him on a marker board to communicate. She wrote, I am in the arms of Jesus. I feel him here. He loves me. I am not scared. So even in this state of complete unfairness, she has every right to be bitter and angry, resistant, but she was merciful. She was hungry for God's presence. She hungered and thirsted for righteousness. She was at peace. And I think she must have been pure of heart because she really did see God, even in the worst place. And I don't say any of this to mean God's loss. Goodness knows I am more on the side of seeing the suffering than seeing the good. That's my nature, right? But I was challenged by these two funerals because they spoke of things that I don't naturally identify with. I don't naturally identify with hope or peace in the heavenly kind of way. It's not easy for me. But these two lives were shaped by blessedness, and I couldn't ignore that. So again, what does the blessed life look like for you? What blessed life are you seeking? For me in the last couple of years, it has meant letting go of and refining my idea of the blessed life, even ways that my life, even in ways that blessed life would have looked good on the surface to anybody else. So I'm in a new role within a varsity. I've been working in campus ministry for, I guess it's 13 years now, 14 years now. Gosh, I'm old. But my role is I now work with the graduate students at MIT. I'm their campus pastor for the fellowship, and it's really great. I like it. I like them. I'm good at it. Works for me. But the truth is, this job is a demotion from my last job, which I chose willingly. I was an area director of numerically the most successful area in our region, most number of converts in the country during the pandemic. The pandemic was very hard for campus ministries and churches. Most of them saw 60% reduction in size, which for some fellowships they can't have any critical mass, like collapse. My fellowships did not. I was doing a lot of great work in this upward trajectory. It was nice to be in management, I was going somewhere, and yet in the pandemic and in the year after, I feel like I just saw lots of ways that what I wanted from it, what I was getting from it, what I was giving to it was not in the right proportion. I was giving all my best energy to this idea of work, and so when I'd come home, what I had for Lily and then eventually our boys was not the right amount. I think that growing up in a Chinese church, not ours per se, but kind of in the kind of Chinese church ecosystem, the thing is, like, if you're a pastor's kid, the church matters more than the family, is kind of what typically happens, right? And I was like, if I'm not careful, I'm on the road to this. Because I actually like to work. I'm sort of an addict to it. It's energizing. It's fun. I can still stay up till like 1 or 2 a.m. with undergrads. I still know enough of the memes. I know enough of the language. I can hang with them. But there was a cost to me and to other things that really mattered, that needed to matter. And so after a lot of discernment and God's guidance, I took a path that was, technically speaking, a step down. But the truth is, while that was hard at first, I actually don't feel that's a step down. I think it's actually the best thing I've done in a long time. I might have gone kicking and screaming at first, but it's been really, really great. The things that I can give and am good at and good to give are well suited to what my fellowship now needs and can receive. I'm not fighting or prickly in kind of how my role fits in kind of an organization. I have a blessedly simple task and focus, and it's been very fruitful. And because of that, I'm much more mentally available, calendar-wise available, emotionally available to Lily, to our boys. I'm able to be there in a way that was a hope of mine, but I wasn't necessarily going to be good at without some big changes. You know, so I go to conferences and I have peers who are similar in age to me, and like they have less impressive stuff that they've done, and they're moving upwards and onwards, and occasionally that hurts. But mostly I really say, like, I was at this one meeting where my new team was there and my old team was there, and my new team, we were doing a kind of spiritual retreat. Just, hey, sleep, retreat of silence, pray, read. My old team was in like a 36-hour consulting intensive to sort out strategy and dysfunction in the ministry. And I sat there and I'm like, this is a very full circle moment. So if I never changed my job, I would be in this room at this very moment. Also, I would just be sitting in that circle. But now I'm actually sitting over in this circle, and our most important question right now is like, who wants to go for a walk around the lake, and not who has to assess like mismanagement or kind of like lack of awareness about funds or misuse of strategy or like I was like, wow, these are two very different paths converging in the same room, and I was just blessedly thankful. Now, my friends in that group, I love what they're doing. It's like going really well, but I was like, I just glad that I didn't have to be that person. It's counterintuitive, but I was experiencing a sliver of the blessed life. I was like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. This is pretty cool. Not what I ever would have wanted or chosen of my own nature, but by trying to trust God's promises, ending up somewhere that is so much better, at least for what I'm called to and where I am. And I can accept that. Again, I don't think blessedness is natural. I don't think it necessarily comes naturally to us. It certainly doesn't come naturally to me. But it's really good. And leaning into it, I'm learning to trust it more and live a different way, learning to choose God's blessed life and release my grip on these other things. Again, I don't think any of that stuff is all bad. That's not what I'm saying. But what consumes our dreams and hopes? What is it that we get most mad about, most stressed about, most excited about, right? In a non-judging way, just like if it's a thing or a way someone thinks about you or things you get to do, it may be worth asking, what is my blessed life and what does God actually want from me? So I'll close by just reminding us, reading the text. And I hope that you'll be inspired to look to God's promises. You'll be invited to choose the blessed life that God has for you. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward of them, from the way prophets go before you. May we all be blessed that Jesus has for us.